Hello, my name is Shora Slough. I'm the sports editor of The Saint, and today we're joined by Gabe in our continued coverage of the Student Association elections. Gabe is running for Athletic Union President, my bad. Gabe, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Just want to tell us a bit about yourself and your experiences of sport in St Andrews?
Yeah, so I came to St Andrews looking to pick up a new sport. I just injured my knee my last year of high school, so I couldn't play kind of the contact sports I was used to. I stumbled into ultimate frisbee. I spent the last 5 years on the committee as freshers rep and then logistics officer, and then the last 3 as captain. And yeah, I mean, Saint Sport, I mentioned it before, literally changed my life. I have a new degree path that I got onto because of my interactions in sport. I have a new career path that I want to be on. I got to play at the highest level, playing at the World Championships and captain in Great Britain, in Australia in January. And so that's kind of like why I'm here, why I want to run for this. It's changed my life. It's given me great opportunities, and I want to kind of give the same to everyone else. So
is that why you've decided to run for AU president, just to kind of sort of give back then in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a really great experience with Saint Sport, but a lot of it was through my own initiative. I really went out. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a director of sport who aided me through this, but me and the couple of people on our team who played at the World Championships, we had to have constant meetings with Tom, us kind of hitting him up, asking, can we do this, can we do that, is the money there for this? Right. And it was a great experience, but it took a lot of effort, and I want to make it easier for clubs to give those opportunities for their students. So if we can streamline things within the AU that make clubs work better, then they can do what they do best, which is giving back to the people that want to play that sport, helping them reach the pinnacle of their sport, and helping them kind of grow as people. So that's why I want to be AU president.
Do you think, particularly with the field this year, has been incredibly strong? We've got 4 candidates, more than we've had for a while. Why do you think you're the most qualified out of all of them to be Athletic Union president?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of reasons. In terms of what I bring to the role, when I joined Frisbee in my first year, it was very, very small and mostly recreational. And over the last 5 years, we've really grown and become a lot more competitive. Last year, we were the second most Bucks points winning sport in the uni. We won a Bucks championship indoor, and we were competing at kind of all levels, and we sent 5 people to go play at the World Championships. And so over those 5 years, I've been a leader in a club that's been very different at different levels. And so we have 60-something clubs in the AU, and they all are at different stages in development and want different things. And because I've been part of the club in various points, I feel like I have something unique that I can bring.
Right.
And then sort of on top of that, I've got, part of it's managing the budget. I've worked in hedge funds. I've worked on, I've had internships in Wall Street and things like that, as well as I've worked in sports and sports psychology, and I've helped captain a team at the World Championship. So I have both sort of business experience and sporting experience outside of here.
Okay, that's interesting. Your manifesto, I think, can be broken down into 3 major things. You've got kit, you've got accessibility, and transparency. I think starting with the former of those, in terms of kit, you talk about a balance between affordability and quality. And your experience, what has your experience been with kit in your time in St Andrews?
So in my 5 years here, we've had 3 different kit providers. We've had Kukri, O'Neill's, and now Player Lair. And at least my personal experience is that all of them have kind of fallen short. Right. So with Kukri, they didn't have any sort of thin playing shirt. So in Frisbee, you run a lot. We were wearing incredibly thick gear, which isn't really useful. With O'Neill's, we kind of had the contract and they left really quickly. And Player Lair, like everyone, we've had delayed things. We place orders that never show up, 6 to 8 week delays. And on top of that, for us personally, most of our playing kit, the first time we washed it, it all bled through. The numbers on the back bled through to the front, and that's just kind of unacceptable. And it's okay to have expensive, high quality kit sometimes, as long as there's ways for students to access it if they don't have that kind of money. But to ask for that kind of expense and outlay for kit that doesn't fulfill the needs is inappropriate, I think.
Right, so given that, how are you going to approach the tender process, assuming that you get elected?
Yeah. So I don't know how far it'll be by the time that I take office or whoever takes office, but there's a couple of things that I'm looking out for. One is just affordability. You need to be able to afford it if you're a student who wants to play. Number 2 is what sort of options there are for if they don't offer a sport-specific thing. So Player Lair doesn't offer riflery jackets, for instance. Right. They don't offer an Ultimate Frisbee-specific top. Lots of clubs have complained about that, and you should be able to go out and get your own sport-specific gear if it's not offered, and at the moment it's kind of iffy with Player Lair, so I'd like to make sure there's a provision for that. And then the third one is just kind of promises about quality, and because we've had so many, about quality of the service, we've had so many kit providers that haven't reached that I'd like to see the provisions in the contract for some sort of penalties or offerings if they miss these deadlines.
Okay, interesting. Do you think, how then are you going to specifically tackle this issue of specific kit for niche sports? Is it more about putting something in a contract that says clubs are free to go out and get something if they wish to do so?
Yeah, I think that's what it has to be about. It's about having a dialogue before we get into a contract with the different providers, saying, giving them examples. If you don't provide a riflery jacket, what sort of liability are you going to give us to go out and get something for them, even if it's not within? Because it depends on what kind of contract. So we might have something where there isn't a gift of kit, so there isn't a requirement to buy excess kit from that provider. So I think, it depends on what the offers are, but I'd like to make sure that there are options for clubs to go and get kit if it doesn't fall under the category of something that's offered by our new provider.
Right, okay. Moving on to accessibility then. You've got plenty of well thought out ideas about an online booking portal. And the thing that really struck me actually was your data analysis of gym trends. What do you think we can really learn by sort of examining the data that we're collecting at the Athletic Union?
Yeah, so I think it can be done really simply. If you Google a restaurant or something like that, and you get the little thing on the right that has all the statistics of when they're open, what the phone number is, but it also says when it's usually busy, what the peak times are.
Right.
And there's no reason we can't do that with the gym. We have a counter right now. So if, over the first couple of weeks we recorded that and then posted when the peak times of use in the gym were, because right now if you look at the counter and go, oh, there's only 200 people there, well, there's 350 people that saw that and then ran there and now it's full. And so if we have just generally when the peak times are, you can schedule your week better. Because I know for me, gym is a really big part of my lifestyle. It keeps me healthy. It keeps me happy. If I don't go out and I work out, I feel quite unhappy. And sometimes it's really hard to schedule in gym time because if it's not in that 9 to 5 slot where everyone's in class, it's slammed. So you can figure out, well, I've got an hour and a half on Tuesdays at 2:30. It's usually empty then, so great. That's one day I'll go to the gym. And I think you can plan your life better that way.
You also talk about charity events as something that we can do, sort of that are a bit more inclusive. You mentioned dodgeball as something. Do you have any other ideas that you think could be really useful?
Yeah, so dodgeball is just a specific example, but at my high school, and I know at other universities, the AU and societies work really closely. So right now, one of the biggest things is a society will book out a night at the Vic or in 601, and that's great, it's a good way to make money, but what if you want to do a non-drinking event or you just want something different? So if societies had come to the AU and say, hey, we'd like to run a six-a-side football tournament or a dodgeball tournament, or we'd just like to have a sports night, and some of the proceeds go to them and some goes to the AU, that could create a better working bond between societies and sport and the AU both ways. So you could get new people getting involved in those societies and people who might not come to the AU normally could get involved in that.
As AU president, you have to meet a lot of people and talk to over 60 clubs. If you're going to try and foster relationships with societies, do you think you have the scope to be able to reach out and foster those relationships between societies that are perhaps non-sport related and the AU?
So I think it's not about me fostering relations with civic societies. I think it's about me fostering relationships with the other SABs and letting them know this is something I'm interested in. Because we have people whose jobs are societies and the union and things like that. And if I'm working with them, they can be the one to publicize it. Hey, someone goes to the societies officer and goes, we want to raise money, but we're not sure how. They can say, well, I talked to the AU president. He would be really keen to have someone come in and run a charity six-a-side tournament. Is that something that you'd be interested in? And so I think it's more about that of opening up to the other members of the committees and the SAB positions that, hey, this is something I'm interested in and working with them to get it done. Because, no, I won't have time to meet and form a relationship.
Of course.
The clubs are a large enough body as it is.
Right. I think the third major part of your manifesto focuses on transparency. Obviously, it's a bit of a buzzword.
Yeah.
And you've got some key concrete ideas in there, focusing on town halls and I think an AGM to explain finances. Would those AGMs be open to other aspects that you think would be worthwhile having in there?
Yeah, so I haven't finalized exactly what would be what, but my two main things, as you mentioned, are definitely a budget meeting. AGM is usually where you talk about budgets, so that's why I say AGM. But we get a huge budget, and some of it's earmarked when we get it, and some of it isn't. And so if clubs had a better idea of that, the budget's £620,000, but this much had to go to this. Okay, I understand better why swimming got that much money and we got this much money because they have to travel there. And I think right now it's a lot fairer than people realize, but if you don't know how the allocation process goes, seeing some club getting triple the budget of another club can feel quite harsh. And when it comes to town hall meetings, kit's the best example I can give for that. Everyone had problems with kit this year. And everyone was emailing Tom separately, and everyone was meeting with the player reps separately. And if everyone was in the same room giving their problems and explaining it, then clubs can see A, they're not alone in their issues, and B, they can see that something's being done about it. They're all in one place and they can talk together.
Do you think, you've worked closely with the AU in the rise of Frisbee. as captain. Do you think there's been an issue with transparency with the athletic union?
So on my side, I don't think so. I think I've got a good working relationship with Tom, with the different people in the AU, like Elaine and Pete. But that's been because I went out and forged those relationships. If you don't make the effort to do so, you don't find out what's going on. So I feel like I've got a really good in-depth knowledge because I've chosen to go and do that. And your average student doesn't have the time to be in the AU 6 times a week meeting with people. And I've neglected my studies, so it's easy for me to end up there. But I want to make it easier for people to access the knowledge that they need as opposed to having to go out on their own and make it happen.
Okay. I think another major aspect of transparency is about a performance sport.
Yeah.
And obviously, Frisbee, the only performance sport category, I think, is in the UK as well. And only director of sport.
We have the only full-time coach and director of sport in all of the UK.
So what is your view on this idea of, particularly this was something that came up in last year's election, was this idea of a performance versus non-performance divide?
So I think it's not as big as clubs think. So when we went from kind of unofficially a performance sport, because we had a director of sport, but we weren't very competitive, to we want to be a performance sport, not much changed. We only this year got a slot in the S&C suite. Because some of us had it last year because we were playing GB, but it wasn't club-wide. And I think the biggest problem is that lack of transparency, that lack of knowledge. So I think clubs that are in performance sport think that performance sports get, money thrown at them and they're swimming in, allocation money and all this stuff, and that's not the case. And, what's been brought up is it's hard to define how you become a performance sport. It's really difficult. But at the bare minimum, if we can't do that, we need to tell clubs what are the benefits of being a performance sport, what the expectations are, so that club that isn't one doesn't think that the performance sports are getting triple the budget and access to facilities that they don't. So it's about making sure that we can give as much information as we can, even if we can't define how to become one. I would like to be able to do that, but I have to work with Pete on that, and I know Tom's tried and kind of struggled this year. So at the bare minimum, we at least need to have kind of a sheet that is, this is what a performance sport is, this is what it isn't. It isn't that you get a swimming pool full of gold.
Yeah, you talk about, I think the pathway is the term that you say, so like a pathway that clubs can use. Do you think that will make any progress upon Tom's efforts to try and get a definition?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Even if we can't define it, it ends up being a subjective criteria, to the directors of sport and things like that. If there's a document that says these are the things that we care about and these are the things that we don't, is it about, because at the moment, is it about size of club? Is it about, participation? Is it about competing at the highest level? Like, what is it? Because if it's about size of club, it very easily would be football, rugby, things like that. If it's about competing at the highest level, it's us, fencing, water polo. If it's if it's about participation outside of things, you'd have rugby in there with sevens and things. So just explaining better what it is and how to become one, even if it's just sort of a loose set of terms.
Okay, all right. I think those are kind of your 3 general main points of your manifesto. You've got kit, accessibility, transparency, and they're all very well thought out. Is there anything you think that you need to add? I know speaking to all the other candidates, they put a major emphasis on well-being. Do you have anything that you want to say on that you think you should have included in your manifesto, perhaps?
So I'm quite happy with the manifesto. I think AU president is the one where it's hardest to write your manifesto because at the end of the day, you're beholden to 60 different clubs. So when I was writing this, I wanted very specific, achievable goals as AU president that I knew would make running clubs easier. There's lots that I'd like to do. So obviously I need to meet with clubs and work with them. But when it comes to mental health and well-being and things like that, there are people much better set up than me whose jobs are about that. So I'd love to work with the Dowell, with Nightline, with people who spend their time at university focusing on mental health and well-being because they can tell me much better what the best way to do it is. So I feel like I can bring a sporting expertise and I can work with them and they can say, okay, these are the sorts of things you should be doing, whether it's training people like others have in their manifesto or it's bringing in outsiders and charities, because I don't believe I have the knowledge to tell you how the best way to approach mental health is, but as someone who's struggled with mental health their whole life and has really had a great relationship with student services here, it's incredibly important to me. Okay,
that's very good of you and honest of you to say. In that case then, is there anything you think you'd want to say to the camera and all of everyone watching and say, go out and vote for me, or a final statement, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, my entire thing has been about making sure that we have the best facilities in place and the best opportunities in place to make clubs run better. I think if our clubs have a lot less of headache about funding, about facilities, about allocations, and they can focus on what they do great, which is getting people involved in sport and helping themselves and their members reach the pinnacle of sport. The AU's done that for me, and I've had these opportunities. I want everyone else to have them. And I think the best way to achieve that is by easing the burden of easing the burden of clubs and their members so that they can focus on sport.
Well, thank you, Gabe, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for watching. My name has been Shores Lyle, and this has been the Saints coverage of the Student Association elections. Thank you for watching.